This program is not intended to diagnose, cure, or treat any disease or disorder. The listener is encouraged to seek sound medical advice from their doctor or other qualified healthcare practitioner before taking any supplements or starting a new health regimen. Welcome to the Nutrition Heretic. I'm Jim Ducharme, your co-host, along here with Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic herself. Hello, Adrienne.
Hello, Jim. How are you today?
I'm fine. Here we are on Valentine's Day weekend, which means, I don't understand Valentine's all that much. I mean, I'm the guy who once gave his wife a couch for Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
I really did that.
We wonder why things turn out the way they do.
I
Ever
gave,
the romantic.
I thought that there were romantic overtones in it. But
See, I'm no better because I don't even. I ask for toasters and kitchen appliances and stuff that most women would cry about. That's the stuff I want. Like, if my husband just brought me a pound of mortadella from San Francisco, and I'm stoked.
Was it shaped in a heart?
No, it wasn't. I don't really care about that. I just want the meat. Just give me the meat.
It's okay. Yeah, no, I guess, yeah, that would kind of be creepy if it was shaped in the shape of a heart, you know?
But they do have those ribeyes you can get
In the shape of a
facing
heart?
each other. So, yeah, they put them in a heart-shaped plastic shell, and then they slice them in half, and then they open up, they fan them out so that they look like they fit right in the shape of the heart.
Yeah.
Now, if that doesn't say love, I don't know what does.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know about anybody else, but after a big ribeye steak, I'm not the most romantic guy you're ever going to meet.
Okay. I don't want to take that somewhere I might regret. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe we should just move on because we're about as romantic as a hockey team.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the deal. This week,
Yes.
as like last night or whatever, I'm looking through my emails, and I see this study claims that low B12, which is vitamin B12, seen in aging, autism, and schizophrenia. And of course, it's by some scientific journal, and all of these scientists, because we have to respect the science, and the scientists who have been telling me and all my quack friends for the last 20 years that we don't know what the heck we're talking about when we talk about B12 being a significant vitamin that is missing in all of these conditions. They told us that we were crazy, that it didn't exist, that it's not true. And now, at least 20 years later, they come back saying, look what we've just figured out.
And B12, they call it B12 because it's a 12-inch needle in the butt, right?
It could be.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did.
Don't do it again. So what you're saying is that, for years the medical establishment has denied that, and I mean it's certainly true that vitamins are downplayed quite often, especially the delivery methods,
not
right?
as much as minerals. I got to tell you,
Yeah?
Vitamins are not downplayed as much as minerals. They still haven't figured out the significance of minerals. There's just a few of us whack jobs out there talking about it, and they're like, oh, no, just get your vitamins and everything else will fall into place. So, I mean, they do recognize the importance of vitamins, but they really like to push their medication. And if you can solve something by either getting somebody to eat the right foods or supplementing them with a harm vitamin, they're much more ready to say, oh, you don't know what you're going to get. Oh, not me. Don't blame me if it goes the wrong way. So what I have taken a beef with, because beef is actually very high in B12, is that they constantly call people like me names, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. And then they come back. It takes them 2 or 3 decades to come back and figure out what we've known all along and what we've been helping people with all along.
But isn't it always the case with the medical I was going to say industry, which
It is an industry.
yeah, and I thought you'd latch on to that.
It's true. Hey, if they're reporting their earnings every year, yes, they're an industry.
They're not, they're not really open to change. They're not. I mean, we go through this. You can almost look back at it as a sort of a, segment off the history of medicine and how, there were people who downplayed the, germs and sanitation and that kind of thing. And yet, look what one man did in New York City just by fixing the sanitation situation that existed in New York City, and how the mortality rate was slashed by his. I can't remember the man's name now, but
now we've gone to an extreme with sanitation, to the point that people are so fearful of germs that we don't understand there is a role, that germs are not all necessarily bad, for one,
Yep.
and that the good germs often protect us from the so-called bad germs. So we really, everybody loves to talk about moderation, but nobody wants to follow it, and nobody really wants to implement moderation in the way that they practice their daily lives, and the way they practice nutrition, the way they practice cleanliness. Because I'll see people do some really nasty things, like, they'll have, I don't know, pet hair in the teacups and
oh,
just whatever, and then they'll get all wigged out because they saw a feather on the shell of the egg that they bought at the supermarket.
yeah, that's yeah. No, I
It's like, do you know where the egg came from?
Yeah. That's it's true, and you see it. My daughter, the first time she ever went to a farm and and saw the eggs and poop and stuff on them, she goes, "Oh, that's gross. I'm glad we get our eggs in a store." And I thought that was hilarious. It's like they're still coming out of the same place there, kiddo.
Yep.
It's just,
Well, actually, I have a friend who had a really funny story, because he grew up in a family where they grew his grandmother grew her own eggs, raised her own eggs, and had her own little garden and stuff. And he and his sister, though, were growing up in the city at this point. And they go over to grandma's house, and grandma makes eggs, and his sister refuses to touch the eggs. And so grandma sends her or somebody else down to the corner store to buy some eggs. And she starts eating the eggs, and she's like, "See, these are real eggs. These are the ones from the store. I don't eat these eggs that come out of chicken butt." And then she later, 20 years later, finds out that grandma used to sell her eggs to the guy down at the store, at the corner store. So she just went back and got her own eggs.
sweet.
But she was so adamant about everything being so clean and coming from the store and sanitation that she didn't even know that it was the same exact freaking eggs that she was eating.
Well, there is that mythology, right? That if it's wrapped in plastic, it must be clean and sterile and safe. And of course, we've learned the hard way over the last, especially the last couple of decades, it seems that is not the case.
Right. Well, and the other thing that we also don't seem to understand is that when they take lab animals and they have given them sterile food, they die very quickly. So the more sterile your food supply, the more depleted your body becomes.
What would sterile food be?
Really, a lot of the stuff that's in a box. Have you heard that
So
certain
craft dinner is sterile?
Yeah, pretty much, unless you add milk to it. It's pretty sterile.
Okay.
Yeah, it's borderline. A lot of the stuff that's being sold in these packages to look so good, and this is why kids and adults, for that matter, are so sick. I was talking to a friend of mine. She's the same age. I'm 46. She's 46, and every conversation we have is about her medication. And I'm thinking to myself, she has more. She's on more medication than my 81-year-old mother was before she died. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is a problem, especially when most of your meals come out of boxes.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I do think that generally speaking, we could make the case that we are over medicating our children. We're obviously over medicating ourselves.
Right. But I don't want to go off on a total tangent here.
Really?
But but people are so obsessed with everyone being a vector of disease, and this is causing a Zika virus, and all these things are coming at us, and we got to protect and do. It all starts at home. We're too busy looking outside of ourselves for these solutions that we don't even start with the most common sense, which is right here, right now. And we've gotten so wrapped up in trying to make everything so clean, so sterile, so sanitized, that we are doing ourselves a huge disservice. And yes, children will come home with more illness, but that's not because children inherently pass illness around to one another. It's because the terrain is compromised.
Yeah, and I think any parent can attest to that, because one of your kids brings something home, or someone in the family brings something home, and the reaction to it is different depending on the person. Like, depending on how many, the older they are, the better they seem to handle it. I know I'm generalizing. Don't send me hate mail, but
I'll do that anyway.
You get the folks that have been around and been a little bit more, exposed to more of these bugs, that cold may not be as bad for them as the person.
But also remember that those people started out very different from how kids start out today. The food supply was entirely different. Even before the 1980s, you could say that the food supply was markedly better than it is today. And going back further, you could say in the 1950s, it was better than in the 1980s. And before that, it was better in the 1900s. Before the whole food processing thing really took over. So if people have an issue with B12, what often happens is they end up having to get shots. So a lot of kids, I've seen this particularly, well, I've actually seen it in the elderly and in autistic children, where very frequently they are extremely low in B12. Often, in the case of children, it's often because the parents eat a very restrictive diet during and prior to and in the early year. During and prior to pregnancy, as well as in the child's early years, when that child, they're eating diets that largely don't contain any animal foods, and animal foods are the only assimilable form of B12 in the diet. I know there's a lot of people who say that's a crock of shit, and that there's going to be B12 in certain algae and others, and those analogs just don't appear to provide what humans can actually use as B12. So they pass through the body. The elderly, I actually attribute that less to the kind of vegan side of things, but more towards the tasteless diets that are given to the elderly. We are often told that elderly people do start to lose their digestive capacity. And if you don't produce enough acid in the stomach, in particular intrinsic factor in the stomach, then you will not cleave the B12 that you need for your body to use it. Make sense? And what they do is,
I'm hung up on the whole cleave thing. Sorry.
But what happens is that these people, I believe that really the huge problem we're seeing with the elderly, yes, I do believe that digestive function may turn down a bit in the elderly. However, I don't think it needs to be as bad as it is. I think a lot of the problem is coming from the fact that the elderly are being told constantly that they've got to eat less salt and less fat and less of the stuff that makes you want to eat. So when salt, for example, sodium chloride, the chloride in salt is part of what makes hydrochloric acid that helps us digest our food. If you don't digest your food, you don't get hungry. Your body just eventually starts to shut off that part of the system, and suddenly you are not digesting your food properly. So in order to promote good digestion, we want to make sure that we are getting enough fats to assimilate our nutrients that are coming from food, in particular minerals, which I've already underscored as something terribly overlooked, as well as our fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. That's very important. And then, of course, we need the salt to kind of make that catalyst to get the digestive juices flowing. And when and I'm sure that the medical industry is just about to come out with some B12 solution that's even more expensive than the shots. And they won't want to hear what I have to say. But these are the easier ways to start if people are showing signs of compromised B12.
Well, that's a pretty good lead in actually to today's guest, because we're talking about optimal digestion today, correct?
Yes, in many ways. It's well, let me introduce Deborah Pell Yaffee. She's been a friend of mine and a fellow certified nutritionist for how long have we known each other, Deborah?
Oh my goodness,
15 years maybe.
At least.
Yeah, and she and I actually met because we also practice energy medicine. And then I found out that in my early days of belly dancing, her husband is on some of my favorite albums. He played on some of my favorite albums. So we're like kindred spirits floating through the world. We have so many parallels between our lives' progressions.
Adrienne, it's really funny. I completely forgot that part, the belly dancing part.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very interesting time because, good old Chef Marty played the electric oboe with George Abdo and the Flames of Araby Orchestra at the very famous in the 70s and early 80s, the Avaroff restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they created 6 international albums. Now you can get Smithsonian Folkways Spot Monitor records, and so they put together a best of George Abdo. You can get that on Amazon. Nice. And listen, you can hear Marty's amazing, the snaky solos that we all love as belly dancers. And that's how I met him. I was dancing at the Avaroff. And it turns out that since then, we haven't seen people from that band since maybe 1981 or so. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow night, as a special for Valentine's Day and for my birthday, which is next week, we are actually going to the Sahara in Worcester, Massachusetts, where Ed Malikian, who played the oud in that group, has his own ensemble. So we're going to actually be having great lamb shish kebab and Lebanese fattoush salad and watching belly dancers. And I'm pressing Marty to bring his oboe for old time's sake.
Oh, that'd be awesome. This is the first time I actually wanted to be north in the winter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well,
didn't I see those guys open for the Village People in 1979?
I don't know.
Thought it was them.
I don't know.
No, wrong.
wrong electric oboe.
Yes.
So Deborah, with your husband, Chef Marty, you started something called Hypno Chef. Can you tell us what Hypno Chef is?
Well, we're sort of on a journey to sort of settle what that is ourselves. It's everything but the kitchen sink.
Oh, okay.
But, basically, we're both hypnotists, and Marty's a chef, and of course I'm a nutritionist, and we also do energy medicine of different sorts and energy psychology, and we have a lot of metaphysical background, and we do a lot of meditation types of things, especially from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective. We study with a very well-known Lama, and what we've pretty much put together is, as we've grown in terms of working with people, is we started with nutrition and good food, and then we realized, when we had our restaurant for quite a number of years, that part of the reason people really liked our restaurant so much, and they actually felt like they digested, speaking of digestion, that they were able to digest their food so well, was because of Marty's attention to, to the plate and how it looked, the presentation, the colors, the kind of music we played in the restaurant, the atmosphere, the congeniality, the sense of community, the kind of art we had on the walls, everything. We were sort of ahead of our time without realizing it.
Yeah.
In this psychology of eating and food, and just for our own selves. Then we became interested in hypnosis and became certified in that. And so pretty much we learned a lot about the mind and food and digestion and health and the interaction of that. So I kind of think of HypnoChef as being sort of where mind and matter meet the science of your platter kind of thing.
Oh, I like that as a slogan.
Yeah. I mean, because we're really looking at, Marty and I were discussing this earlier today in preparation to speaking to you all. And our view of things is that pretty much everything is food in some sense. And everything affects how we receive the food and digest it and absorb it and utilize it. And so there's many, many, many things that you can talk about. What we do in our work with people, every person that comes, of course, as you know, as a nutritionist, each person is different.
Exactly.
So it has to be client-centered. So sometimes people just come to us and what they really need is just a loving heart listening to their troubles with food.
Right.
Maybe they're trying to break up with caffeine or something, and they're finding it very difficult. And maybe they're just maybe there's someone who's struggling with portion size or feeling like they've eaten enough, and they just need to change the size or color of their plate. There's a lot of research going on in these things that we've been just doing for years. So just like you were saying, people used to think we were like nuts and what is this crap you're talking about? Well, now the research is coming down and out there. And it's very important research because it's research that's even to the point of saying ambient sound can be affecting how you perceive the taste of your food. So they're recognizing all these things that Marty and I've been sort of just doing naturally for years. I think I even mentioned to you, like, in the Facebook there, just even the fact of being touched and loved can totally change how you receive food. And of course, we're looking at this in the sense of, coming from that Buddhist background. To us, everything about the meal, the perfect meal is all about the perfect diner, and that's really about the diner's mind. And it has to do with this concept of interdependence,
Right.
So you're eating, we're looking at, people's digestion and their relationship. We're looking at their relationship with food and with eating in terms of not total whole body nourishment.
Right.
And some of that nourishment, I had a laugh actually. I was just mentioning that about research is that just maybe a couple of weeks ago, I came across some research which apparently is very popular right now. Charles Bent, having to do with sound and music and things like that with food. And, for a while, Marty was actually inviting people over for dinner, and he had this whole concept, because, as you know, he's a musician and he's a composer, and his whole idea was not just the composition on the plate, but to do like pairings, like musical pairings with your meal, you
Right.
know? Or even when you were cooking, because there's also about the love that goes into the food,
Right.
I mean, if you're very, very sensitive, you really can tell the difference between something that's been prepared for you with love and something that was like, that person had a really bad day.
Yeah.
Well,
it's funny that you say that because often when I cook, I always have cooked in a way that is just very organic, and I do sometimes use recipes, but it's more about, I use the recipes more about the technique, to get the right amount of searing or whatever I need to either seal in the flavor or meld the flavors the right way. And that's where I normally will consult with a recipe. But when I show people how to make things and then they go to try and make it themselves, you could just see the difference in intent, and they go, well, it doesn't taste like yours. And I said, well, because you didn't approach the flour with the right hands, or you didn't. And it's sometimes it's just the mechanics. It's not it, but just think about the difference between if you were asked to hold a little child's hand versus holding perhaps your spouse's hand to holding the hand of someone, Ted Cruz.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You would approach that with such a different energy coming from you. And so I always say to people, just be peaceful with it. Be peaceful with the whole process of cooking.
That's right.
Just bring as much contentment as you can. Not even necessarily love, just contentment and pride in the fact that you have this opportunity to do this for yourself.
Right.
Because if you're not going to nourish yourself with food, then all your speech is about wanting to nourish yourself. You could probably just throw them out the window, because that's where, seriously, that's kind of where we start, isn't it? As humans, if we can't start with the things that we need to survive, and showing ourselves love, then all the woo-woo talk about how they want to take care of myself and nourish and do all this stuff and nurture, it doesn't really make any sense to me anymore. So because it seems like to speak to what I said earlier, it seems like in those cases people are looking for something outside of themselves.
Yeah. So you're bringing up. You're reminding me of a very important issue. When we started from food and nutrition, and we've always seen how that affects your mood and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so when I became a hypnotist, it's sort of heresy, and I'm sort of a heretic in the hypnosis world, because so many hypnotists really insist that you just need to change the mind, and then, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And especially this is in terms of, of course, the bread and butter for most hypnotists is weight loss and smoking cessation.
Exactly.
And I really sometimes get into a little, some fights with people, because they're not looking at the nutrition, the real nutrition.
Right.
And, if you're going to do a bad food plan, yes, you will have good results with the hypnosis. The hypnosis will work for, if the person does their homework, it'll accomplish that end of things. And it may even help overcome cravings for a while, or their behavior in terms of what they're eating and everything. But at some point, the body, I'm sure you've read Candace Pert's Molecules of Emotion. And she comes right out and says, your body is the subconscious.
Right.
And so you can only hold off so many things with, the subconscious mind and in terms of hypnosis work, and beliefs, because at some point, if you are not eating properly, that hormonal cycle is going to kick in, and you're done for. There's a biochemistry that can't be overrun by the hypnosis. They have to work hand in hand.
Right, and that's something.
I think that's where we originally were thinking about HypnoChef, is that you really are looking at the mind and the body, the nutrition and psychology, and the hypnosis work together. But it became much broader, the things that turned out we could do with it.
What I was going to say is that this is something that in the EFT community, emotional freedom technique community, that I've often butted heads with people on. And it's funny, because when I talk to Gary Craig, he would say he completely got it. Yes, you do. You don't need to eat chocolate and all this other stuff that everybody's trying to tell you is good for you, the new fad foods and the processed food. He has never endorsed, as far as our conversations went, never endorsed just keeping your diet the same. Same thing with Donna Eden. She is from Eden Energy Medicine. She also talks about how we have all of these wonderful real foods. Louise Hay talks about it. All of these people talk about this, but a lot of the people who follow them never hear that part of the message somehow. And so where I've butted heads with people is letting them understand, for example, EFT is often used for pain, right?
Yeah.
And there's a concept of chasing the pain. So yeah, you started when you came to me, you had a pain in your knee. Now it's in your low back. And then you chase it from there to your neck. Why are you chasing it away so much? Is because you never corrected the underlying fundamental ingredients that are going into your body that would make the change last.
Exactly. In fact, that's funny you said that, because earlier today I was reading about, how serotonin, having enough serotonin can really help reduce pain, discomfort. You know, that's why those serotonin foods are kind of like comfort foods, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. EFT is interesting because, from my perspective, EFT I came to before even hypnosis, and EFT is really, for me, it really is a hypnosis, but that's another heresy,
Right.
So I'm right with you, heretic.
Well, there you go, fellow heretic. So I think Jim had something to ask.
Well, and aren't serotonin levels also closely related to mood? In other words, that often how they treat depression is with medicines designed to boost serotonin?
That is true. They do that, and then those things can backfire in that kind of a setting, as I'm sure Adrian probably spoke about before. But yeah, serotonin it's your happy mood chemical. And that's why one of the things that I also do is I teach, I'm a senior trainer with the Tai Chi for Health Institute. And Dr. Paul Lamb, who's a medical doctor, put together these easy to do, easy to learn programs for arthritis and diabetes and such. And definitely one of the things that I speak of, when I'm teaching a class, if we're doing something like Tai Chi walking or even just a little program, I actually remind people that this motion, this rocking motion and the Tai Chi walking helps your body, provided you've given it, like Adrian and I were talking earlier, you have to have the building blocks in there. But once you've got the building blocks of the food in there, then all these other things like Tai Chi or, like movement, exercise, like that gentle exercise, or rocking, even just rocking even, can help the body produce, more serotonin. And then you just feel, that's part of why you feel better. Exercise helps you feel better. That's part of it.
Right.
You're definitely up. And I consider, so that's part of our HypnoChef thing is, movement it's an essential nutrient. Your body craves this, and so, one of the things we talk about in, HypnoChef is, Marty and I like the concept of what we call the other comfort foods. So, we use hypnosis and good food training and cooking classes to help people reframe what's a comfort food. So maybe they were thinking of that mac and cheese and that hamburger. And, well, hamburgers, like a junk food hamburger, not a real hamburger. You got to be careful.
And yes, we need to distinguish these things because, and that was actually one of my questions for you is, why do people perceive comfort foods as inherently unhealthy? As I said, I think it was last week on the show or the week before, I said, give me the taco. I'll eat a taco. I'll eat pizza. I will eat hamburgers. I'll eat bacon double cheeseburger. I'll eat pretty much anything as long as it's real food. But unfortunately, many of these foods have been introduced or in the mainstream appear as a processed piece of leather.
Or I was going to say, we call those, what do we like to call those? Edible products.
Right.
They're not food. They're edible products.
Right.
People are eating them. They're products that people eat, but they're not food.
They're not. They're absolutely not even food.
Yeah. But we like to, that's our job is to help. We use all the tools that we have. We use our hypnosis skills, EFT, Z-Point, Marty's cooking skills, nutrition knowledge. So we use all those things to help people reframe what a comfort food is. And within those comfort foods, we like to include things like things that you don't think of as comfort food in the whole body, whole soul system. And that would be things I mentioned like touch, music, nature, sleep is a big comfort food.
Right.
Light itself, breathing, getting good air, water, beauty. Like I remember one of the most precious things when my daughter went to college. She went to Northeastern University, and pretty much, when she had exams coming up, she would go to. It was right near the Museum of Fine Arts, and I'd say, "Well, where are you?" She'd be texting her, "Where are you?" "Oh, I'm at the MFA having my beauty break," because that was so nourishing to just release some stress, be fed through. It's like your soul needs some food, and it actually translates into better digestion, as it turns out, of course, better absorption of nutrients, and just your whole energy of your whole system benefits. Meditation, we do a lot with custom work with affirmations and prayers, teaching people to do be their own hypnotist, because words are so incredibly powerful. So if they're always telling themselves, like, they're a picky eater.
Right.
Let's say they're starting to have health problems because they're such a picky eater.
Or as in Jim's case, I hate vegetables. You remember that one, Jim?
Oh, yeah.
I was one of them.
I have a T-shirt that says that.
So we have hypnosis for you.
So what would you do with someone like Jim? Because Jim told me... Jim, what would you do with someone like Jim? Because Jim told me the other day he was eating, what was it, canned ham with canned potatoes?
Yeah, it was really good once it was fried.
Oh yeah, fried.
So yeah, what do we do with him? Because I'm not even sure where to start with this one. I mean, one of the things I've always told my clients is to I don't care if, first of all, don't eat on paper plates. There's no bigger sacrilege than eating on a paper plate unless you're at a picnic. Okay?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Adrienne, because that was something else I was thinking about in terms of, the thing about presentation and the messaging that your body, like I said, your body is intertwined. It is your subconscious mind.
Right.
And your regular thinking subconscious mind, understands messages. And it works in symbols. Your subconscious mind is like a child, it's very literal. It works with images and pictures. And so, and it's very literal. So if they've done studies that have actually shown, I'm sure, one of my favorite books is Mindless Eating by Brian Lansing.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read that. But
no, I read one, though, that was The Slow Down Diet.
Uh-huh.
That had some really nice tips, and a lot of this I come back to actually another book that you had recommended to me on metabolism. I think it was Jumpstart Your Metabolism, and really that a lot of these techniques that you're talking about seem to come back to one common ancestor: breathing deeply. And oxygenating the body. When you relax, when you eat in a relaxed atmosphere, whether it's induced by music or the company that you keep or the beautiful dishes that you're eating on, or
they all affect the breathing.
Exactly. Because when you're relaxed, you breathe more deeply. And when you breathe more deeply, you get more oxygen. And when you get more oxygen, you digest your food better.
Yep. And you provide the fire for each.
Exactly. The oxygen is the fire. It fans the flames.
Yeah, absolutely. So breathing is certainly an essential comfort food, and good water.
So we're gonna have to wrap up. I mean, we never really got to what you would do with Jim, but
Well, I can tell you, I mean, we did have a success story once of someone who was a very picky eater, and of course they hated pretty much all vegetables and whatever, and and so Marty and I both worked with that person, and pretty much to begin with, of course, a lot of picky eaters. I mean, Jim, you're exceptional in that you actually put stuff in a pan and cook it. A lot of picky eaters won't cook, so that's an issue right there. And it's an identity. And it's really that identity is built up from a belief system. So if someone believes they're a picky eater, then we do some hypnosis analysis work to find out, what are they getting out of that? Why is this belief being sustained? And for what purpose? Sometimes there's other issues going on and they're maintaining that identity. Sometimes it turns out they're picky because of, you find out what the reason is that they're being so picky. And generally, having a good cook like Marty, who's inventive and creative and like that, and, you start by, I'm sure you know this, it's like treating yourself like a child. You have to sneak the vegetables into things, So we have a lot of tricks having to do with that, making food that really tastes good, and yet the vegetables are in the food, and the person doesn't even realize it. And so once they get the idea that they've eaten a beet, in a chocolate cake or something, or a tomato cake, or a ginger zucchini roll-up, one of my favorites. At the end of the summer, what do you do with all those zucchinis? So once you start getting the idea that they've actually imbibed it, that's step one. Like, oh yeah, they can't say that they're so picky that they'd never eat it if they've already eaten it. So
right.
They start to get used to the idea that they could eat these things that have good things for them. And then there are a lot of techniques having to do with, sometimes there's looking at changing your perception of something. And there's what the first time I ever saw something like this that blew me away was, I love hypnosis stage shows. And I saw somebody on a stage show, the hypnotist actually gave the person an onion, told them it was a big, gorgeous apple, to take a nice, big, juicy bite out of that apple. And the person did, and they actually were enjoying it until the hypnotist said, but it's really an onion.
Right.
So, it's really about our mind, and so we do some different things that, hypnosis techniques to help people move slowly. And then, of course, there's also the question I always respect. I can't believe how many people want to just give up a food because they have a belief about it, and that's like this magic thing that's going to change their life.
Yeah. And often that's a bad move.
Exactly.
Particularly if you're giving up a real food. If you're giving up something that really can't qualify as food, that's one thing.
Right.
But to give up entire categories of food because of some, like you say, faulty belief system, or some way it's going to make you an ally of whatever rock star just said he went on a diet, or it's it is disturbing. But yeah, people really dig themselves into a hole with that.
Yeah.
And I do find it particularly disturbing when I hear people in this kind of hypnosis, energy, psychology, law of attraction type of setting denigrate real foods. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you believe in the law of attraction. How do you not believe that this negative energy?
Junk.
Sorry?
So that means they're junk attracting junk.
Yeah, basically. But when they get to a point where they start denying real foods because they're so inherently bad for you, and this is going to change the world if everybody eats like me, kind of thing. And when they get into that state, it seems like they're not attracting the right thing, because now they're sending out all this negativity.
Exactly.
Towards food, and what ends up happening is, little by little, their diets get stricter and stricter and stricter because they create so much anxiety from one meal to the next.
Exactly.
So what are a few suggestions that you can leave with people, and they could be things that you've already said, but maybe two or three things that you feel are really important for people to understand before we go today?
Well, as we were just talking a minute ago, I was thinking that one of the most important things that I've seen with my clients, and certainly with myself when I was working on becoming, getting over being a junk food junkie, was that cleansing, nutritional cleansing. So I'm not talking about some weird thing. That's a whole other conversation about real cleansing. Um, uh, that really affects, the toxins that we are exposed to and have been holding on to, especially if we've grown up in this McDonald's fast food society eating that way. It really has affected our taste buds, and so I think learning about real cleansing, not insane diet, kinds of things, but learning to like real foods that'll help your body adjust and become normalized for taste. That's kind of an important thing. One thing we didn't speak about, but Marty does Chinese herbs. He's got a training in Chinese herbalism, and so there's a whole thing about 5-element constitutional.
Yes.
And that's a very important thing. I don't know much about Ayurvedic, but that's the same kind of idea that there's certain imbalances, and those are like that causative root of the problem.
Right.
And there's ways. So looking at energetics, learning more about energetics of the body and of the foods is a good thing. And I think probably to me the most important thing in terms of our relationship with food is to really broaden that idea and to reduce stress as much as possible and go back to those basics of just traditional real food is not going to harm you. Like you can rely on that. It was very reliable for many years.
More than just many years, my dear. Millions of years.
like billions of years, yes. And to include with that, to not be just a one source food, like just traditional foods, but to look at the other things, like to eat with people you enjoy, to have good color, even if you're just looking at a flower, to take time to pray or have gratitude, like have some blessings with your breakfast or something. Joyful movement. And really the most important thing to me is really watching our language. Our body is listening very carefully, and using positive language skillfully can really transform your relationship with food.
Right. Well, I often comment that people will tell me, "Oh, well, I feel fine eating whatever it is," and they're down to eating like 12 foods now, and "Oh, I feel great," and "Oh, I never get sick." But when you're not talking about their diet and they're not on the defensive about it, you hear about every freaking ache and pain and this falling off and crusty this and oozing that, and it's just. So many things are going on. So just as the body's listening, I'm listening to you too. So you can't get one over on me.
And I would certainly tell people, and the other thing I would tell people too, is also very important, that we can't underestimate the power of sleep.
Oh yeah, we need to repair.
People's sleep has to be repaired, because that is a huge thing in terms of our the whole cortisol and insulin and everything that has to do with our need to eat, our eating habits, very intertwined with sleep.
Absolutely. It is a very needed nutrient, and I would say as much as, well, I definitely think movement is important, but when I see people running marathons and bike-a-thons and this and that, and they're doing all of these more demanding types of exercise.
Yep. Exactly.
Because and that's another thing, is that a lot of people become addicted to exercise, which that in itself is a little worrisome, particularly when they have damaged their knees, their feet, their whatever that they need to, their elbow, to practice whatever sport it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, if you're not getting the benefits, like you're obviously not getting any benefits from this other than the psychological benefit. Your body is breaking down for a reason. Get some sleep and get some good food into you.
In the end, my mother came from a Greek family, and so she was always into that. It's like my big fat Greek wedding, right? Everything comes from Greece. Everything comes from Greece. And so, as you're speaking, I'm hearing it in my mind as my mother's speaking. The Greeks always said everything in moderation, and no matter how many thousands of years, and no matter how many scientific theories about this food and this diet and this exercise plan. Doesn't it always come back to that basic everything in moderation?
The quote is actually, the quote translated is actually moderation in all things, which is a little bit different than everything in moderation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, because people think, everything in moderation. I'm going to buy Pop-Tarts. I need my Pop-Tarts to balance this. Anyway,
we used to call that cheating in the zone when we used to do Carrie Sears' program. I can have this glass of this with this ice cream with this steak, and I'm balanced.
Exactly. And that's where everything in moderation doesn't really pan out for you, does it? But what I wanted to say is that you have given us a copy of the cleanse, correct? That we can give to on our site.
Yeah, it's just a basic. A little report on just some thoughts about cleansing, nutritional cleansing for the body, mind, and spirit.
Awesome. And I think we need to come up with another word for cleansing.
Yes, I agree.
It's the cleansing and detoxing. Most people, when they talk about it, they're just talking about the surface. They're just saying like, we're just going to empty your digestive tract for a few days and that's it. But when you and I talk about these terms, we're talking about something that goes to a much deeper level, going into the cells, cleaning out the glands and the organs and letting them do their jobs properly.
Exactly, cellular cleansing.
Right, exactly. So it's a very different concept. So if you think this is just another starvation, master cleanse kind of thing, this is not that. This is something totally different.
Correct.
All right. And Jim, can you give us our URL?
I sure will. NutritionHeretic.com. And if you want to check out the podcast, you can check out NutritionHeretic.com/podcast. And if you're on, what am I saying? If you're on Facebook, of course you're on Facebook. The entire galaxy is on Facebook. Facebook.com/NutritionHeretic. That's our Facebook page. If you want to get in touch with us and be on the show, you can contact us through our Facebook page, or you can go to our website and contact us there. And remember, please, if you're listening to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, please review and rate the show. That's really important to us. So please get in there, give us a few stars, say a few words, takes a moment of your time, and we will be forever grateful.
And we'll keep bringing you more of this awesome content.
More of this yummy mind food. We will keep bringing it your way. Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you, Deborah. Great show. And
thanks for having me.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Jimmy. See you next week, Jim.
See you next week.